Hello, hello, hello. I'm Jean,
I'm Shae.
and today we're going to be talking about animal cruelty laws in the United States.
Everyone's favorite subject that makes no one uncomfortable ever.
But that's alright, because we're going to hopefully demystify some of the laws in the United States regarding animal cruelty.
Yeah, hopefully break it down a little and make it more digestible.
A little more consumable for the common consumer. So to begin, animal issues are also human issues. We've got this very friendly raccoon here to tell you that, because the way that animals are treated often reflects the way that humans are treated, as they're a part of the environment. And environmental justice is justice for all aspects of the environment, including the animals. Now, Shae, I've got a question for you. How many states do you think consider an octopus an animal?
I get the strange feeling that you're asking because I'm not gonna like the answer.
You are certainly not.
Cool.
Shocker, shocker, it's actually only 19.
Yeah. If the graph we have here is a little much, we do have a nice little pie chart for you to visualize.
It's bouncing in here. So a solid 38% consider them an animal. A beautiful 22% have it debatably as an animal. And a beautiful 40% of states consider them just flat out not an animal.
Yes, and when we were considering what would be debatable, part of some of them are when you're looking through state cruelty laws and you're looking at definitions of animal, some of them decided not to give one. I don't know what to do with that. Do they go by the federal definition? We'll find out. And others, they have a little funky thing where they decide that they're only animals if they're captured or previously captured wildlife.
Yes, which is convenient in states that are like landlocked, because then I guess they're animals.
Like Tennessee, we said yes. There's no wild octopus and captured in Tennessee, but Texas has a bit of a thing with the Gulf of Mexico.
It's complicated. That's why we put them in the debatable section, all right?
We're not policy students. We don't know how much of the water is considered U.S. territory.
No, we do not.
So, optimistically, it is a 60% yes, but we can't say that
pessimistically. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. All right. So, as like a broad definition here, this is not the legal definition. Animal cruelty is like when humans put animals into harm's way by neglect, infliction, or commission of harm.
Yes. To be clear, we aren't casting judgment on what we think is animal cruelty. We'll be talking about a few different broad subjects, but we won't be saying that or deciding that keeping an animal in captivity is cruel. We won't be deciding that definitively using animals in testing is cruel. We'll just be talking more about the laws.
Yeah, and you can make those decisions for yourself.
Yes.
We don't want to pressure you into any choices here. All right. There are 4 common definitions of an animal in states. All right. We've sorted them from least inclusive of animals to most inclusive of animals.
Yes. So starting with least, one of the more common ones is any vertebrate except humans. So that there's some issues.
There's a lot of issues.
That's where the octopi really got.
They do.
Because they're invertebrates. So despite how intelligent octopi are, they're not an animal because they don't have a spine.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it really is. Moving up.
Yes, for our next level of inclusivity, this definition is very similar to the last one, but it's just a little more unnecessarily complicated.
And they decided sometimes fish, even though they have spines, are not. The fish are occasionally added, but
fish are kind of tossed in there as sometimes an animal, sometimes not.
Sometimes very specifically not.
Yes, like in some cases that is like not fish. And then for our like more inclusive like definition, we've got every living dumb creature.
Yeah, it's very similar to our most inclusive, any living creature other than humans. It just, again, was said kind of
a little
weirdly.
mean.
Yeah, like, is an octopus dumb? Should they not be animals also in these states? I don't know. We're gonna go with it, but that was a little rude.
It's just a little mean to call them dumb.
Yeah.
There's no need. All right, so as a brief overview before we get into the specifics, we're going to be talking mostly about federal and state laws, zoos and aquariums, animals in agriculture, and then animals in lab settings. We aren't really going to be going into pet-related laws, just
Or wildlife.
Or wildlife.
We just don't have time.
We do not have time. We're just going to be going over, we're just doing an overview of these main 4 concepts.
Yes.
All right, first off, we've got federal and state laws.
Okay, we have gone a little bit into some of them, or mainly the state definitions, but as a general definition, federal laws, that's everyone has to follow, and federally, under the Animal Welfare Act, an animal is any live or dead warm-blooded creature that is not a mouse, a rat, or bird bred for research, or livestock to be used for food or fiber. There's also a horse thing.
That's unrelated right now. And then we have, for state laws, states can narrow down further from the federal law, and then that's when you can start to include octopus as an animal and stuff.
Or anything cold-blooded.
Anything cold-blooded.
Anything.
Lizards deserve to be animals.
State laws also would have an option to include livestock or those animals bred for research.
Yes.
We'll see if they do.
Yeah, we'll go over that in a second. All right, now we've got some particularly strange animal state laws that we discovered while researching this.
Yes, my absolute favorite is New Jersey. Well, tied with Connecticut, but New Jersey, what is the whole brute creation?
What does that mean?
Presumably it's a Bible thing. What? Just what? Whatever, I guess. Wyoming, they almost fell into one of those didn't feel like giving a definition states, but they did give a definition for what a household pet is and what livestock are. Okay, I guess.
Those are the only 2 necessarily defined in there, isn't that right, Shae?
Yeah, there's wildlife doesn't exist. Animals, like zoo animals, do not exist. Lab animals, no one's heard of them.
No birds.
They don't exist in Wyoming. Oh, the birds though. You get Connecticut, they go with the New Jersey brute creature route, but add birds, which is a weird implication that birds weren't included. Are birds animals in New Jersey? I don't know.
It's got some weird implications.
Yeah.
And then we move into Delaware, which...
Yeah, Delaware, there's a couple states that instead of defining what an animal is, they decided to define what it isn't. And Delaware, they decided an animal, no matter what it is not a fish, crustacea, or mollusca. We did not misspell mollusca. They did in their actual law. It should be a C.
We just wanted to clarify that, all right?
Yeah, that wasn't on us. That's Delaware.
Utah is my personal favorite, I'd like to say.
Oh, yeah. So Utah has a lot of exclusions. They basically decided that whenever possible, we want it to not be our problem. So when we'll be talking about what AZA is, but they decided that any zoo accredited by the AZA, so a member of AZA, that's not their problem. Those aren't animals. The AZA can decide when someone's being cruel. Likewise, if you're an animal temporarily in Utah with a circus,
you're not an animal.
Nope, you are the U.S. Department of Agriculture's problem. Utah doesn't want anything to do with you.
Utah does not worry about the tigers and stuff in circuses. And then finally, we've got New Mexico.
Yeah, New Mexico does another Delaware. What is an animal not? And they decided they're not insects or reptiles. Thanks, New Mexico.
Thank you very much, New Mexico, for your addition here. All right, now we've got some concerning oversights in some states that, this is not necessarily covered federally, but it is concerning that it's not covered in states. For starters, mandatory forfeiture, that requires people to give up their animals if they've been convicted of animal cruelty.
Yep, it's not uncommon for that, or at least not as uncommon as you would like, for that not to be mandatory or even possible, or in the law at all. So that's one of the concerning oversights, definitely.
Yes. We also have mandatory reporting, which is not required in some states, where if a vet sees an animal getting abused, they don't have to report it.
Yes, this also applies to social workers generally. So veterinarians and social workers do not need to report, but that also means there's no assurance for them that there will be no repercussions if they do report. So it really does not incentivize reporting when it's necessary.
Yeah. And now, finally, as I would consider it our most concerning oversight.
No one wants to talk about it, but bestiality.
It's only a misdemeanor in some states.
New Mexico.
It's
not illegal.
And
federally speaking, it's only illegal if you are a service member. You will get court-martialed for it.
But that's
but
not.
Otherwise,
most other states made it illegal, like, on their own. They were like, yeah, bestiality, don't do it.
Not New Mexico.
Not New Mexico, and Utah and Alabama just made it a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Discouraging. All right, and now we're going to be moving on to our next section, which is zoos and aquariums.
All right, so we mentioned the AZA a little bit earlier when we made fun of Utah, but the American Association of Zoos and Aquariums is just an organization that provides guidelines of animal care and oversight to member facilities.
Basically, they just pay a fee for reputation, practically. And in exchange, they make a promise to help with conservation and education where they can. Privately owned zoos, or non-AZA accredited zoos, are commonly referred to as roadside zoos, which basically just means that they did not pay the fee to get accredited by the AZA and therefore followed only the guidelines of the state for care of their animals.
So because of that, they have significantly different welfare standards, and there are some legal differences in their oversight just because they only really have to answer to federal and state cruelty laws, which, as we've touched on, are perhaps not as thorough as they could be.
So the Big Cat Public Safety Law was actually a law that passed through the House as of last Tuesday during this recording, which is a federal law to ban the private ownership of big cats like tigers, lions, cheetahs, etc. It basically, facilities licensed to have big cats would be prohibited from any contact between the public and the cubs as well, to prevent cub petting.
Yeah, and cub petting is just a practice where big cats are constantly bred to provide more cubs just to entertain the public. They play with them, they bottle feed them. It's detrimental for the health of the adults and the babies. And this issue sort of came into the public eye and ended up becoming a law because of a documentary called Tiger King. You might have heard of it. It leans sort of more towards reality TV. It's more about sort of a personal dispute. But because there was a feature on big cats in captivity and cub petting, the public took notice, the public was really focused on it, and because of that, the Big Cat Public Safety Law got a lot of attention in turn. It was a law that originally was introduced in 2012, was introduced a couple more times, never got anywhere, and then the show comes out in 2020, and 2 years later, the law is essentially passed.
Now we're going to be going into agriculture, and we're going to be talking more about like livestock and such.
All right. So an important thing to know about animal cruelty in regards to animals used in agriculture is what an ag-gag law is. So an agricultural gag law essentially prosecutes whistleblowing in regards to any agricultural facility. So you cannot take photographs or recordings in facilities. You cannot misrepresent yourself to gain access, and it requires turning over evidence of animal cruelty within 24 hours. That 24-hour period is significant. It feels on first glance like that's good, you have to turn over evidence, but it means that you can't accumulate evidence against a facility. So these laws are really designed to disguise animal cruelty in the agricultural industry. So,
and then we also get to talk more a little bit about different acts that the United States have, such as the Humane Slaughter Act, which requires livestock to be sedated completely for slaughter.
Unless you're a bird.
Unless you're a bird, which is very concerning because that includes chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, there's the 28-Hour Act, which has every 28-hour period, transports with animals must stop for exercise, food, and water. Once again, unless you're a bird.
Yes, birds are not included. This is also if the transport already has food and water, also exempt. So there's chickens.
Poor chickens.
Yeah, I mean, it's any fowl really, but chickens.
Chickens get it the worst.
Yeah. All right, so this is a potential law, the Farm System Reform Act. This was proposed. It will prohibit the further creation of any new concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, and support existing facilities in essentially transitioning away from those practices. So a CAFO is what you think, like when you think of chickens in really close proximity and not able to go outside, that's when you get a concentrated animal feeding operation. They're just really concentrated animals in an animal feeding operation, which is defined legally, I believe, as anywhere where an animal is raised or held for 45 days or more.
And for our final section, we're going to be going over lab work laws and laboratory-related laws.
The Laboratory Animal Welfare Act was an act passed in 1966, and it was in response to a Dalmatian pepper being stolen, sold to a research facility. She died there. It was a news story. A representative took notice and made this law. It was originally just specifically to prevent cats and dogs from being stolen cats and dogs from being sold to research facilities. That was it. Over the years, it then expanded to more animals, general animal cruelty things, and then in the lovely year of 2002, there was an amendment to their definition of animal to exclude birds, rats, and mice bred for research. This is significant because that is 95% of all lab animals. So if the Laboratory Animal Welfare Act, if that name sounds familiar, we did mention it earlier. It is now only known as the Animal Welfare Act. This is the primary federal law in regards to animal cruelty. And that amendment was made because scientists essentially were a little salty about having to treat their animals humanely and asked to regulate it themselves.
As well, we've got the 3R alternatives, which are alternatives for animal testing if you're funded by very specific organizations, and you're required to look through these alternatives first before doing testing on animals. This includes, like, first R is replacement, and that's replacing practices or technology to hopefully get rid of animals or ensure full sedation before using animals for testing. And then we also have, for our second R, reduction, and that's to reduce the number of animals used and the number of animals harmed. And for the final one, we've got refinement, which is refining practices like handling, enrichment, and anesthetic use to improve welfare and hopefully reduce pain and distress before anything else. So the FDA actually has no legal standard for what you have to do to put, quote unquote, no animal testing or cruelty-free on a package. So it's not always trustworthy. If that standard is really important to you, I highly suggest you research the brands that you're buying from before you purchase anything from them. Because oftentimes they will say cruelty-free or no animal testing for the final product, but not necessarily, that can't be true for the raw materials sometimes. So, Shae, can you tell me a little bit about the Humane Cosmetics Act and what it's about?
Of course I can, Jean. So the Humane Cosmetic Act is another prospective law. This would initially just incentivize companies to phase out animal testing, mainly by monetary incentives. And then after a certain period, though that it would be illegal to use animal testing on products made in the U.S. or sold into the U.S. So this would be a sort of a stage-by-stage law to reduce animal testing.
Yeah, hopefully eventually prohibited entirely in the United States, yeah.
A lot of those practices replaced would actually be for rabbits. A lot of cosmetics testing is on rabbits, which I didn't anticipate.
So there are a few ways that actually you can help, and we narrowed it down to about 4 main ways that you can help. For starters, awareness is key. There's no way to really help primarily, besides just being aware as much as you can. Being aware of the animal cruelty around the U.S., being aware of the products you have, and that's where consumerism comes into play. Being conscious of the practices of the companies you do and don't support. Consider what kind of lifestyle changes might be possible for you, and kind of like reducing the amount of meat you eat, buying locally, getting chickens, or like food scrap disposal, like knowing where you're going with consumerism is important. And as well, we've got activism, which you should consider donating charities or writing to your representatives to see if you can change anything in your state. And finally, if possible, and try not to be kind of mean about it, try to educate others. Make sure that other people are aware of what's happening as far as animal cruelty goes. It's kind of hard to learn on your own. All right. Thank you guys very much.
Yes, thank you so much. So this is the end of our time with you, but if you have any questions, we do have links in the description to help guide you in further research, and we obviously have the sources from our own research for you to also look at. So if you want to see what your state defines an animal as, do they have a bestiality
law? Yeah.
We have everything for you
We've got it all in the
sort of
description for you to take a
explore
look
on
at
your
it.
own. So
We believe in you. All right. Have a nice day.